Hello and welcome to another in our occasional series, Radnor Health Matters, in which we discuss issues concerning the health of citizens of Radnor Township here in Pennsylvania. This morning we're going to be talking about a subject that should be of concern to every pet owner in our township. The subject this morning is going to be rabies. My guest this morning is Dr. Len Donato. Dr. Donato is a veterinarian who practices here in the Township of Radnor and is also a fellow member of the Radnor Township Board of Health. Good morning, Dr. Donato, and welcome.
Hello, thanks.
Let's start by trying to give our viewers an idea of what rabies actually is.
Rabies is a virus that's transmitted from mammal to mammal, and it affects the central nervous system, mainly the brain and spinal cord.
Well, you mentioned that it is transmitted from mammal to mammal or animal to animal. How is that actually done?
Rabies is transmitted through bite and the saliva. There's only two main ways that rabies can be transmitted, and that's through central nervous system fluid or saliva.
Okay, well, how does it actually look when you, as a veterinarian, how does an animal respond to being bitten by another animal who has rabies?
The animals that present with rabies usually have, again, some central nervous system issue where they may become overly aggressive because of the virus attacking the brain. They may become, there's also a dumb rabies, where it doesn't seem like they know what they're doing, so they are not doing so well with just normal everyday function. They may be dragging their back legs. Later on in the disease process, they will excessively salivate, and a lot of behavioral issues just because of the virus attacking the brain.
How long does it usually take after the bite, the initial bite, and the infection has begun? How long does it usually take before some of these symptoms show up?
It can take anywhere up to 6 months, although it can occur as soon as 2 weeks generally. What happens is when they're bitten, the animal is bitten, the virus travels up the nerves to the spinal cord and then moves up the spinal cord to the brain. So that takes a certain amount of time. Depending on where the animal is bitten, it can happen, again, as soon as 2 weeks up to 6 months.
And if it's not treated, what happens? Is it almost always fatal?
If the only way to treat, so to speak, is to give vaccination beforehand, preventative, or to give a vaccine once an animal's exposed. So what happens is that the animal receives a bite, and if they're vaccinated, generally we're in good shape. If they develop the rabies, where you're actually seeing clinical signs, they're going to die. There is no treatment for rabies for animals or humans once the signs set in.
Well, what should a person do then, given the seriousness of this, if they see a wound of unknown origin on their pet? What should a person do immediately, and what should they follow up?
Sure. If an owner of a pet sees that they have a wound, you have to assume that it's a bite. So taking to a veterinarian to, one, determine is this a bite or just a regular wound is really important. And then if it's determined that there is a bite, rabies vaccine has to be administered immediately, and then the animal goes into quarantine.
You say the vaccine in this case is what I gather as a prophylactic kind of treatment to prevent the possibility, even if we don't know that the biting animal was rabid.
That's right. So the rabies vaccine is given, and what that does is hopefully stimulates the immune system enough to where the animal's own immune system can fight off the rabies virus.
Okay, should a person make any attempt to wash the wound before taking?
Sure, that's a really good question. I'm not a fan of that happening because a wound can be painful, and now if you're washing it as an owner at home, and it's painful, sometimes you can be bitten by your own pet. That has happened many times. So usually I recommend just going ahead and bringing the animal to the veterinarian, cat or dog.
Can human beings get rabies?
Human beings can get rabies, and generally what happens is if they're bitten by an animal suspected of rabies, and we will watch that animal in quarantine for 10 days.
What would you do with a human being?
Well, being a veterinarian, I just say go to your regular physician, go to the emergency room. We've had, I work with a fair amount of wildlife, and we've had staff members, and I've been exposed as well to animals that have had rabies. We go to the emergency room right away to get our rabies immunization. Again,
that's as preventative after a bite has taken place. With dogs and cats, though we give them vaccines to prevent rabies from happening in the first place. And I think the frequency is every 2 or 3 years, is that correct?
The frequency of rabies vaccines is the first rabies vaccine given, and that's usually right around 12 weeks of age, 12 to 16 weeks of age. That's good for 1 year, cat or dog. And then after that, there's different rabies products. We generally say that the second one is good for 3 years for dogs. There are certain products used for cats that it is given yearly. Those are safer for the cats, which is why they're given in that way.
Is there a vaccine for humans?
There is, and the hospitals around here are equipped with that vaccine.
Good. Well, you've touched on this, and I want to underscore this as perhaps the most important point that we can make during this program about rabies, and that is prevention. So let's talk about that and how important that is for one's pet as well as for one's family.
Yes. Yeah, prevention, there's a number of things that we recommend for prevention, and that is vaccination. Over time, we've pretty much learned that if an animal is vaccinated and it gets exposed to a rabid animal, with the booster vaccination, they do not get rabies, do not develop rabies. And that's very important for everybody to know, because we really can help the people, the families, by making sure that their pets are vaccinated and they will then be safe. That really is very helpful. That's the biggest prevention by far.
Good. Are there laws governing the rabies vaccination of pets?
The Pennsylvania state law says that at 12 weeks of age and a small grace period of a week and a half, 2 weeks, that by 12 weeks of age, every pet should be vaccinated for rabies. And townships usually adopt that because Pennsylvania governs over the townships too.
Can, for those pets such as dogs for which a license is required, can you get a license without having your pet properly vaccinated?
You cannot get a license without rabies vaccination.
So that's important,
yes,
since we are required to license. Absolutely. Are cats required to be licensed?
They are not.
They are not?
Yes.
I want to just indicate that our viewers should be getting their pens or pencils out because at the end of this program we will show you some websites if you are interested in learning more about the subject of rabies, places to which you can go for more information. We've talked a little bit about human beings getting rabies from animal bites or possibly becoming infected. Is human-to-human transmission possible?
Human-to-human, I'm not sure about that. I haven't, while anything is possible, I'm not sure of any cases like that. It's usually animal to human.
I seem to recall the CDC having on its website, that's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for the United States Health Service. I seem to recall that they indicated only a couple of very isolated cases, and they involved a very special circumstance. But again, I don't recall exactly what it is, and those viewers who are interested in learning more about that can find that out on the CDC's website. Interestingly enough, the only instance in which there's been aerosol transmission, that is breathing in the virus, as I'm sure you know, is among some, again, an isolated instance, lab workers. There
was also a gentleman who was cleaning out his attic with, he had bats, and the bat guano aerosolized, and they believe he got it that way as well. That was very close to us in New Jersey.
Yeah. Now, rabies often presents itself first in communities as something that is harbored by wild animals, such as raccoons. And those animals are attracted to our homes by certain behaviors that we as human beings may engage in. So I'd like to discuss a little bit about feeding wild animals. Is this something that poses a public health threat?
It does. When we leave food out for animals, it does tend to attract a lot of the rabies vector species, which are raccoons, fox, skunks. We don't attract bats as much, but and groundhogs aren't as much in Radnor Township, but they're around. So the feeding that we'll do for animals can bring these creatures up to very close to your home. And in fact, a number of the animals exposed to rabies that I see many times are a rabid raccoon or a skunk that actually will get into the house because they are good at manipulating sliding doors and whatnot. So we do see that a fair amount, where a rabid animal actually comes into the house.
Now, some people I know, not that I know personally, but some people who have pets, cats or dogs, sometimes like to feed their animals outside. That is, they'll leave a bowl of food on the deck or a patio or in the backyard so their animals can eat out there, especially in good weather.
Sure.
Would you say that that might have the same effect as feeding the wild animals directly?
Yeah, leaving out large amounts of dog or cat food certainly will bring wild animals, no doubt. My recommendation in that case is, if you're feeding your dog or cat outside, just to put a small amount that you know they'll eat at one sitting, and then that's the best way to manage that situation.
But the very best way would be to either be there and observe,
That's
and
right.
make sure that no wild animals were drawn to it, or feed the pet inside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One other thing that goes along with this too is making sure that your garbage is in a very tight container. If you keep it outside or when you put it out at night, that it's in a good container, because that will also bring particularly the raccoons and the skunks to the house as well.
Now, just pretty much along the same lines, and we'll get to how this connects in a moment, but we've had problems with feral cats in Radnor Township, and my understanding is that feral cats are cats that have either reverted to or been born into a wild-like state.
Yes.
How does that happen? How does a cat who's someone's pet become feral?
Well, there's a number of different things that can happen, but believe it or not, a lot of animals are abandoned on a regular basis. In fact, my own cat I got because someone abandoned it outside. And in particular, if they're not spayed or neutered, then the population of feral cats starts to go up. Spaying and neutering is extremely important in managing a feral cat situation, and many times the people who are abandoning them are also not getting them spayed or neutered.
That's unfortunate for the cat in question and for all of us. Is this a problem in Radnor Township? Do we have feral cats running around?
We do have a number, probably about 3 places where there are feral cats, and in one of them we've had an organization that's come in and removed them and adopted actually a lot of them out, which has been nice. None have been euthanized. They've been either taken to a colony in Philadelphia or adopted out.
That's good. But do these cats pose a health threat to humans and pets?
They do. When you have a feral cat colony, they do have to go to the bathroom somewhere, and unfortunately that is probably one of the things that annoys people the most about them. But not only does it annoy them, it is a public health threat. They are transmitting parasites into the soil of gardens or sandboxes where kids play, and people can get these parasites. They will actually migrate up through their skin. The other thing that happens with feral cats in particular is they spread toxoplasmosis, which can affect women that are pregnant and potentially abort the baby that way by getting an infection to the baby as well. Feral cats are also a reservoir for rabies, as we're talking about, and they're not vaccinated, they're not spayed and neutered, and there is a small percentage of that feral cat colony that could be spreading rabies.
So that's another important issue. Now, in terms of our own human behaviors, I suppose some people, well-intentioned, because they see a feral cat and they regard that as a stray cat, might be wanting to feed those feral cats.
That's right.
Have you seen that happening?
That is happening in the populations we have in the township. One thing that can help that is if someone's going to take the responsibility for feeding that cat, they could also take the responsibility of getting them to be spayed or neutered or vaccinated. Another way around that is not to feed them, which, as we've said, will bring other animals. So if you have a large bowl of cat food out there that is, going to feed, 5 to 10 cats, believe it or not, other wild animals are coming up and getting the food as well. Mm-hmm. And again, raccoons and skunk and fox will easily go for that food.
So all of this tends to compound whatever issues we have with regard to rabies. And
it absolutely does.
Well, I would like to thank you, Dr. Donato, for taking time out of what I know to be a very busy practice of veterinary medicine here in Radnor to join me this morning.
Anytime.
Thank you. And for those of you who are interested in following up and learning more about this important subject, important not only to us as human beings, but important for the protection of our pets, whom I know we all love and cherish and want to keep safe and healthy. There are some websites which we will put up on the screen in a moment on which you can get more information. Thank you very much for joining us this day.